Hey, folks. This is Jesse Cope back with another episode of the American Soul Podcast. Hope y'all are doing well wherever y'all are, in whatever part of the day you're in. I sure do appreciate y'all joining me and giving me a little bit of your time and a little piece of your day. I will try and use it wisely. Hopefully, it gives us some extra tools for our toolbox, and hopefully, it helps our nation turn back to God and Jesus Christ, even if just a little bit, and ourselves as well. For those of y'all who continue to share the podcast and tell others about it, thank you. Very grateful for that. For those of y'all who continue to pray for me and for the podcast, thank you. Very, very grateful for your prayers. Obviously need them and want them as well. Father, thank you for today. Thank you for you, Father, and your Son, Jesus Christ, and your Holy Spirit. Thank you for your love, mercy, grace, and your forgiveness. Thank you for all the blessings that you bestow upon us that we don't thank you for, and the ones that we do. Be with those who are listening to the podcast right now. Be with their families, surround them with your angels, protect them from evil. Draw them close to you, Father. Draw us all close to you. Help us to follow the commands of your Son, Jesus Christ, to seek you and your kingdom and your righteousness first, to love you with our whole heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. Be with our leaders, from the president and vice president on down, admirals, generals, senators, representatives, governors, mayors, judges. Be with the leaders in those countries around the world where people are listening right now as well. Help us to just to seek you first, Father. Help us to be a light to others, to clothe the naked, feed the hungry, care for the sick and the wounded and those in prison. Be with our educators across the country, public school, private school, homeschool. Guide them as they teach our nation's children. Help us to get our priorities in order, Father. And guide my words here, please. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, we ask and pray. Amen. Have you made time for God today? Have you made time to read his word and maybe even pay a little bit of attention to it? Have you made time to pray for yourself, your neighbors, friends, family, nation, enemies? And if you're married, have you made time for your spouse? Do they know that you're married? Do you act like it? Do they go to bed each night knowing that they are your top priority, second only to God and Jesus Christ? I saw a quote. I can't remember where it was right now. It was on social media of some kind. But it basically said that saying and doing are two very different things. We can say that we follow God all we want, but do we act like it? Do we truly strive to follow the commands of Jesus Christ, to seek God? I've started to pray that for myself far more often. I hope that's an indication of a strengthening faith. But do we really strive on a day-to-day basis to make that the center of our lives so that every interaction we have, that somewhere in our mind, God is our guiding light? Same thing with our spouse, folks. We can tell them we love them all day till we're blue in the face. But if we don't show them each day, it doesn't really matter. And we're going to get back to why it's so important for us to know the Bible in regard to both of those things in just a minute. We're going to go ahead and read. This is Proverbs 14 today. Contrast the upright and the wicked. The wise woman builds her house, but the foolish tears it down with her own hands. He who walks in his uprightness fears the Lord, but he who is devious in his ways despises him. In the mouth of the foolish is a rod for his back, but the lips of the wise will protect them. Where no oxen are, the manger is clean, but much revenue comes by the strength of an ox. A trustworthy witness will not lie, but a false witness utters lies. A scoffer seeks wisdom and finds none, but knowledge is easy to one who has understanding. Leave the presence of a fool, or you will not discern words of knowledge. The wisdom of the sensible is to understand his way, but the foolishness of fools is deceit. Fools mock at sin, but among the upright there is goodwill. The heart knows its own bitterness, and a stranger does not share its joy. The house of the wicked will be destroyed, but the tent of the upright will flourish. There is a way which seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. Even in laughter the heart may be in pain, and the end of joy may be grief. The black backslider in heart will have his fill of his own ways, but a good man will be satisfied with his. The naive believes everything, but the sensible man considers his steps. A wise man is cautious and turns away from evil, but a fool is arrogant and careless. A quick-tempered man acts foolishly, and a man of evil devices is hated. The naive inherit foolishness, but the sensible are crowned with knowledge. The evil will bow down before the good, and the wicked at the gates of the righteous. The poor is hated even by his neighbor, but those who love the rich are many. He who despises his neighbor sins, but happy is he who is gracious to the poor. Will they not go astray who devise evil? But kindness and truth will be to those who devise good. In all labor there is profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. The crown of the wise is their riches, but the folly of fools is foolishness. A truthful witness saves lives. Better he who utters, but he who utters lies is treacherous. In the fear of the Lord there is strong confidence, and his children will have a refuge. His children will have refuge. The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, that one may avoid the snares of death. In a multitude of people is a king's glory, but in the dearth of people is a prince's ruin. He who is slow to anger has great understanding, but he who is quick-tempered exalts folly. A tranquil heart is life to the body, but passion is rottenness to the bones. He who oppresses the poor taunts his maker, but he who is gracious to the needy honors him. The wicked is thrust down by his wrongdoing, but the righteous has a refuge when he dies. Wisdom rests in the heart of one who has understanding, but in the hearts of fools it is made known. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a disgrace to any people. The king's favor is toward a servant who acts wisely, but his anger is toward him who acts shamefully. So a few things that jumped out as we were reading this. Verse 7, leave the presence of a fool, or you will not discern words of knowledge. Who we hang out with matters a great deal, folks. It affects who we are. Don't think for a second that you can hang around people that are crass or rude or immoral or thieves or et cetera, and not pick up some of those traits yourself. And the more of those traits we pick up, the more we justify our actions, the more and more we go that way, right? It's like every day, every action, we're at the top of a roller coaster. And on one side is getting closer to Jesus, and on the other side is getting closer to the devil and hell, right? Jesus in heaven on one side, devil in hell on the other. And now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that you can't be saved if you're on one side. You know, if you're on the way to hell, that you can't turn around and be saved. But we ought to be moving one way or the other. And maybe it would be better to have the analogy be just a flat set of railroad tracks. And every decision we make moves us one way or the other. But I would argue that the more decisions we make one way or the other, the easier it typically is to make those decisions. We pick up momentum, we pick up speed, right? So if you hang around people that are bad or good, you're going to become more and more like that. And the same is true, by the way, folks. I see this often from some of the marriage counseling websites and couples that I follow talking about be around other couples that build up marriage. Don't be around people that tear marriage down because it will tear your marriage down. And if you're around people that build marriage up, it'll help strengthen and build your marriage up too. So same basic principle. Verse 9, fools mock at sin, but among the upright there is goodwill. The great divide in America today, folks, isn't between people who sin and people who don't. Everybody sins, despite what some church denominations say. There hasn't been anybody else that's perfect in this world besides Jesus Christ. That's the reason we need him. If other people were perfect, then that would mean that we could obtain salvation on our own apart from God and Jesus Christ, and we can't. So the difference, though, the divide in America primarily, and really in the West in general today, is between people who acknowledge that they're sinners and that they need help. Even if they don't acknowledge Jesus Christ as the Son of God, although, again, folks, every time I say that, I cannot recommend anything more to you than choosing Jesus Christ to accept him as your Lord and Savior, as the risen Son of God. But there's people that acknowledge that they sin. But then on the other side, there's people that mock at sin. They pretend like they don't sin, like the bad things, the evil things they do aren't sin. That's the real divide. Verse 23, in all labor there is profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. That jumped out at me because we had just talked about it and we're going to again. Folks, we can talk all we want, but until we start to act like we follow God, until we start to act like we love our spouse, until we start to act like we love our children, it's just talk. That's all it is. And it leads to poverty. And even in a little bit, folks, even in just a little bit of effort, there's profit. Even if you're, for example, you have kids that you just don't think are listening to you at all, they are. Even if you're married to somebody who absolutely doesn't care about any of your efforts, somebody else sees your efforts and they notice. And maybe it helps them. 26 and 27 is something that we hear so often. In the fear of the Lord, there is strong confidence, and his children will have refuge. The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, that one may avoid the snares of death. A lot of people today like to talk about fear like it's a bad thing. I was very much afraid of my father as a young boy, even into my teenage years. There was no doubt about what was going to happen when I stepped out of line. And yet never once, not one single time in my entire life did I ever think that my father didn't love me dearly. Fearing God isn't a bad thing, folks. It keeps us out of a lot of trouble. Just like being afraid of a parent who really loves you keeps you out of a lot of trouble. We should fear the being that created the entire universe. That kind of power, our little human brains can't even comprehend. And that doesn't for one second change how much God loves us. If you happen to have kids, even if you don't, you think about your own parents or think about friends and their parents or them, how much it would cost you to lose a child that you loved dearly. And that's exactly what God did for us. A lot of people like to say, "Oh, well, if God wanted to, he could just fix everything. I don't know why he doesn't. He doesn't really love us." Imagine if you had to put your son or daughter on a cross, watch them be nailed to it, crucified, beaten, tortured, mocked, when they had done nothing wrong, to pay for somebody else to get out of jail free card, if you will, get out of prison, get out of hell. I don't do a good enough job in my ignorance of fearing the Lord, folks, but there is definitely that's a good thing, not a bad thing. And it means it doesn't mean that he loves us any less than he does. He loves us dearly. And then verse 34, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a disgrace to any people. Mm. Patrick Henry said that. And then I want to read Ulysses S. Grant's, he said that also. I want to read his quote real quick since we're on this. Hold fast to the Bible as the sheet anchor of your liberties. Write its precepts in your hearts and practice them in your lives. To the influence of this book we indebted for all the progress made in true civilization. And to this we must look as our guide in the future. Righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Ulysses S. Grant, 18th President. So, what we're going to talk about for today, for the rest of it, is what we have done over the last several 80 years, several decades, to take God out of particularly education. We look around today and our education system is a disaster. And there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of ideas about how to fix it. A lot of them are not very good. A few of them are decent, but none of them are going to really solve the problem until we put the Bible back at the center of our American education, where our founders told us that it should be. Benjamin Rush, Fisher Ames, again, the man who actually worded the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment, right? And so it all really goes back to 1947. I mean, it goes back before this, folks. The idea of separating, we always talk about John Dewey, the father, the architect of modern public education in America. And he specifically stated in his book in 1929 that the main goals of education were to separate children from their family and from God. And you look today, and the left has done a fantabulous, that's a real word, job of doing that, of separating children from family and from God. All you have to do is look at the number of hours that we send our children to daycare starting at 6 weeks old and then public school. And we can justify it however we want, but there's no real justification for it. We're simply paying somebody else to raise our children, paying somebody else that doesn't have the Bible in the center of their instruction either, for the vast majority of us. Um, so 1947 comes along, though, and the Supreme Court decides Everson versus Board of Education, separation of church and state. They used the quote out of Jefferson's letter, which was, I think, if I remember correctly, written 13 years after the Constitutional Convention, and Jefferson was not there. Um, and really, folks, it doesn't really matter because the Supreme Court twisted Jefferson's phrase completely on its head. Jefferson meant separation of church and state, meaning keeping the church out of control, so you didn't have that crossing of lines like they had seen in Europe and Britain with the Catholic and Orthodox and Anglican Church, where citizens were punished for not following a particular denomination, not for following, it didn't have anything to do with not following God and Jesus Christ. It had to be because they didn't follow the particular denominational doctrine from either the Catholic Church or the Orthodox or the Anglican Church in Britain. And we've talked about that. We'll go back in and do a couple more stories out of the Book of Martyrs. We've talked about quite a few of those people, those men that were burned at the stake under Mary, Bloody Mary in Britain and England, because she was so staunchly pro-Catholic. And so 1947, what they really decided was separation of God and state. That's what they really did. So what did that do? That opened up the door, right? It opened up the floodgates. You go to 1962, Engel versus Vital, or Vital, depending on how you say that. And that said that prayer in its public school system breaches the Constitution's wall of separation between church and state. So again, you can already see the problem here. There is no wall of separation between church and state in the Constitution, at least not worded as such. And when you really understand the First Amendment, in fact, you go back to Justice Joseph Story, who was one of the preeminent um, Supreme Court justices on the Constitution, and his commentaries on the Constitution, specifically about the First Amendment. And this paragraph that we've read so often, probably at the time of the adoption of the Constitution and of the amendment to it now under consideration, talking about the First Amendment. The general, if not the universal sentiment in America was that Christianity ought to receive encouragement from the state, so far as was not incompatible with the private rights of conscience and the freedom of religious worship. An attempt to level all religions and to make it a matter of state policy to hold all in utter indifference would have created universal disapprobation, if not universal indignation. Two really important points out of this quote are that Christianity ought to receive encouragement from the state. And so far as it wasn't incompatible with private rights of conscience, for example, a biblically centered education in America, which was born a Christian republic, is in no way incompatible with individual religious freedom, because you don't have to be a Christian to send your kid to public school, Bible-centric public school. And you can go home and you can go to your particular place of worship, wherever that is, but in a Christian nation, and everybody knows this, folks, everybody. I had a really good friend of mine that I was talking to recently about, and he was talking about these tariffs that the president is threatening or doing. And he was talking about how riled up the left is because they're worried about the opinions of I don't know, he listed off 4 or 5 countries, the Russians, the Chinese, the Europeans. I know that's not a country, but all the countries there. And his comment, my friend's comment, was, who cares? They're not American citizens. Their opinion should have no effect whatsoever on the decisions of our president here in America. His goal is to take care of the American people, not to be concerned with the opinions of others in different countries. That's his first goal. And and so our first goal, anybody's first goal in any organization in any country, should be to build up that country. You see it. China does a great job of it. They're a communist, atheist, evil nation, but that's what their schools promote. Islam, again, totally false religion. Horrible that those countries have to go through that. The children have to be brought up in that. But you see that that's what they do in order to keep those nations Muslim as they teach their children all of that nonsense. And here we sit in a nation founded on the general principles of Christianity, the only true religion out there, and we want to give it all away. If you want to be part of America, that's part of it. That's our foundation, our founding faith and principles. John Adams talked about those were the only principles that could have united all of those men at the beginning of the nation were the general principles of Christianity. That should be in the center of our schools. You go to 1963, Abington versus Shemp. No state law or school board may require that passages from the Bible be read or that the Lord's Prayer be recited in the public schools of the state at the beginning of each school day. Why? Is it going to offend some people? Who cares? Who cares? This is a Christian nation with taxpayer funded schools that are supposed to produce citizens that strengthen that nation. The only way to do that is to teach them the general principles of God and Jesus Christ. You want to go home in your house and go to a mosque or a temple from Buddhism to Hinduism to Islam to atheism to Satanism. That's your call. But in a taxpayer funded public education system, it has to be biblically based in a Christian nation, which we were born a Christian republic. And if it isn't, folks, then we should not have taxpayer funded education. You cannot make the argument that we should have taxpayer funded education in a Christian republic that is blatantly anti God, anti Bible, anti Christ. Makes no sense. It's like working for Ford Motor Company and training all the employees to hate Ford Motor Company. That is exactly what an anti-biblical public education system does. Because if you're anti-Christ, by default, you will be anti-American because America is based on those principles of Jesus Christ. You go to 1980, Stone versus Graham. If the posted copies of the Ten Commandments are to have any effect at all, it will be to induce the school children to read, meditate upon, perhaps to venerate and obey the commandments. This is not a permissible state objective under the Establishment Clause. Ah, folks, bravo, Sierra. Bravo, Sierra, all the way. These people either were grossly ignorant of the Establishment Clause because the man that wrote the Establishment Clause, Fisher Ames, said literally the Bible should be the primary text in our schools. The guy that wrote the Establishment Clause said that the Bible ought to be the principal text in our schools, and these yahoos from 1980 said that having the Ten Commandments, which is part of the Bible if you don't know that, read and having these kids focus on the Ten Commandments, venerate the Ten Commandments. And first of all, why would we not want that even in a totally secular society? Why would you not want kids thinking on honor your father and your mother? Don't commit adultery. Don't murder. Don't steal. That makes no sense, even from a completely secular point of view, that's anyway. Uh, Fisher Ames, right? The guy that actually wrote the Establishment Clause, worded it. He said the Bible should be the primary textbook. He knows a lot more about the intent of the Establishment Clause than the Supreme Court justices in 1980. And then 1985, this is the last one for today. 1986, 1989, 1992, respectively, Graham versus Central, Kay versus Douglas, Yeager versus Douglas, Lee versus Wiseman. Religious invocation in high school commencement exercises conveyed the message that district had given its endorsement to prayer and religion, so that school district was properly prohibited from including invocation in commencement exercise. Folks, we're so twisted. We used to have courses specifically in our public schools on the Bible that gave students high school credit. This is a Christian nation. Of course, you should have prayer in those schools in a taxpayer funded public education system. Again, it's like working for Whole Foods or Amazon and teaching the employees as they go through employee introduction courses to hate the very company that they're working for. Now, some of y'all out there might not like Whole Foods very much, or Amazon, or Ford for that matter, but you get the point, folks. It's asinine to take the Bible out of the center of public education in America and expect us to still produce a positive product with our children. So the whole thing, all these Supreme Court cases, folks, go back to separation of God and state in 1947 and leftism, feminism, socialism, communism before that. And the bottom line is whatever you hear out there today, whatever solution is offered by whoever you're listening to, if the key component, the primary component, the first thing they say isn't put God and the Bible back in the center of education, it's not a real solution. It is not a long-term viable solution. We're just going to end up right back in the same spot that we are now. And that's really true of our nation as a whole, folks. If we don't get off our rear ends and really put God back in the center of our lives, in the center of our marriages, in the center of raising our children, in the center of our institutions, whether it's our courts, our education, our law enforcement, our military, whatever it is, all we did at best was buy ourselves a little time with this last election, at best. You can take that to the bank. God bless y'all. God bless your families. God bless your marriages. If you're married, God bless America. God bless your nation, wherever you are around the world listening. We'll talk to y'all again real soon, folks. Looking forward to it.